Neighbor threatens to sue me for something ridiculous, so I take action first. My neighbor Kevin showed up at my door last Tuesday holding a tape measure and looking angry. He said my fence was 4 inches onto his property and I had 2 weeks to move it or he'd take me to court. I asked him when he measured it. He said that morning with a professional surveyor. The surveyor supposedly charged him $300 and confirmed the fence violated his property line. Kevin handed me a business card for his lawyer and walked away before I could respond. I spent that whole evening furious. I built that fence 3 years ago right after I bought the house. The property markers were still visible back then, and I made sure to stay on my side. 4 inches seemed impossible, but Kevin's smugness made me second-guess everything. What if I was wrong? A lawsuit would cost me thousands, even if I won. The next day, I went to the county records office during my lunch break. I asked the clerk for the original property survey for my address. She printed it out for $2. I sat in my car studying the dimensions and realized something. If Kevin's measurement was accurate, his house would be sitting partly on what used to be county easement land. That made no sense. I looked closer at the survey and noticed his property had a notation from 1978 for the original structure. I went back inside and asked the clerk if there were any building permits filed for Kevin's address after that date. She checked her computer and found only one permit from 1997 for a bathroom remodel. I asked about the large sunroom on the back of his house. She zoomed in on a satellite image and asked when it was built. I said it was there when I moved in 3 years ago, so probably 10 years old at least. She pulled up the code enforcement guidelines and showed me the violation penalties. Unpermitted additions started at $5,000 in fines. If the structure failed inspection, the owner had to bring it to code or demolish it entirely. She said I could file an anonymous complaint if I had concerns about neighborhood safety. I drove home and looked at Kevin's sunroom from my backyard. It was massive, maybe 15 feet deep and 20 feet wide, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a vaulted roof. That wasn't a small project someone does on a weekend. That was tens of thousands of dollars in construction. I called code enforcement that afternoon. The inspector said he'd visit the property within 5 business days. He asked if I wanted my name kept confidential. I said absolutely. 3 days later, I was eating breakfast when I heard shouting outside. Kevin was on his lawn arguing with a man in a county safety vest. The inspector was taking photos of the sunroom and pointing at different parts of the structure. Kevin kept waving his hands and raising his voice. The inspector handed him a packet of papers and drove away. Kevin stood there reading the papers with his mouth open. 20 minutes later, Kevin was pounding on my door. His face was bright red and he was sweating. He shoved the violation notice at me and demanded to know if I reported him. I said I didn't know what he was talking about. He said someone filed a complaint about his sunroom being unpermitted and now the county was fining him. He said it was going to cost at least $12,000 for retroactive permits and inspections. If the foundation or electrical didn't pass, he'd have to tear the whole thing down. I told him that sounded serious. He stared at me hard, then said we should forget about the fence situation. I said that was generous of him, especially since I just had my property professionally surveyed yesterday and the fence was actually 3 inches on my side of the line, not his. I pulled out my phone and showed him the survey document I'd gotten from the county. His surveyor had apparently measured from the wrong marker. Kevin's hands started shaking. He asked how much my survey cost. I said $2 at the county office, public records. He turned and walked back to his house without another word. The inspector came back 4 days later with another man carrying testing equipment. They were inside Kevin's sunroom for over an hour. When they left, Kevin came outside and kicked his trash can so hard it flew into the street. 2 weeks later, a demolition crew arrived. They spent 3 full days tearing down Kevin's sunroom. I watched from my kitchen window as they ripped out the windows, demolished the walls, and hauled everything to a massive dumpster. Kevin sat on his back porch the entire time with his head in his hands.